Good morning. It is Sunday and I am in my thermals because I have been out round the block this morning because it is snowing and it looks very, very beautiful. I've been meaning to start this vlog for a few days and I just haven't. I was going to start filming it yesterday and actually I filmed a few little bits, tiny bits, which I'll insert here. Mr. M and I were playing some unlock games, which are escape rooms, except you're just doing them, it's a card game and you're doing them here as opposed to going to a place and having to literally escape from a room. And he got them as a birthday present from our friends in the summer and we hadn't got round to playing them yet, so we'd done 2 earlier in the week and then we did the hardest one yesterday and it was so much fun. You have a series of cards and you have to solve the puzzles to uncover more cards and then solve more puzzles. But it also goes alongside an app which you download on your phone and it has a timer on and all these eerie sounds which makes it really atmospheric. We really enjoyed playing them, though one thing I will say is that some of the clues rely on you having to decipher really hard to read handwriting or trying to find hidden writing within pictures, and I personally found that very difficult to do. And even Mr. M, who he wears glasses but he doesn't have any other issues with his eyes, he found that quite difficult. I personally found it very frustrating. So that was my only down, really. Everything else about them was really, really great and I'd recommend. I'll link their website down below. My godmother actually got me a fairy tale themed escape room for Christmas, which we'll probably play at some point soon, and I'm very excited about that. So I wanted to start a reading vlog today. I haven't filmed one of those in ages and I always really enjoy doing them. And what I want to do is get through the pile of currently reading books that are sitting right behind you on my bedside table. The books that, some of which I'm actively reading and have started reading recently, and some of them I started reading months ago and I'm halfway through and they're still sitting there. It's a new year. I just would like to not have a pile of books on my bedside table. So I want to get through all of those and talk to you about them over the next 4 or 5 days. I'll show you those books in a minute, but while it is still snowing, I'm going to try and film a read with me video, which will have been uploaded before this video. I'll link it down below. If you need 20 minutes of cozy reading time in the snow, then you can head over there after this. It is the next day. Let me quickly talk you through the titles that I want to finish that have been cluttering my bedside table. So I'm halfway through Arid Dreams by Pimwana. This is translated from the Thai by Weeper Popsicle. It is a short story collection centered on 13 working class characters living in Thailand. I am enjoying it so far, though there are some stories that I am attached to more than others. There are a couple of poetry collections in here. This is Magnolia by Mingya Powles. I have spoken about her work quite a lot. I loved her essay in At the Pond. I also really loved her non-fiction book Tiny Moons, which is centered around food and a year of living in Shanghai. This is her poetry collection. I've been slowly making my way through it. I wanted to savor it. That's all well and good, but now I would like to devour the rest of it. I also have had this on my bedside table for a few months now. This is Dear Big Gods by Arshi. I just haven't picked this up in a while. I enjoyed the few poems at the beginning that I read, so I want to read the rest of that. I also want to finish this collection, which is called The Octopus Museum by Brenda, Shaughnessy. This I am about halfway through as well. There are a lot of poems in here centered around obviously the ocean and the environment, and I was really enjoying that as well. A book I wasn't sure of, and this may be one that I end up DNFing. I'm going to give it one more shot. This is You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce. This is a novel where someone has died and the only way that their niece and nephew can get their inheritance is if they work out how their aunt died, and she's left them a series of clues in her study. I love the premise of this, but the writing style didn't really draw me in when I started reading it in October. Another book that hadn't particularly drawn me in was The Sea Cloak by Nayrouz, Qarmout, and this is translated from the Arabic by Perween Richards. I was really sad that this one didn't drag me in. It's mostly set on the Gaza Strip. It's about a whole series of different characters. I'm going to give it another go and see how I get on with it. A short story collection I was enjoying that I started reading around Halloween was The Wilds by Julia Elliott. I spoke about this in a Halloween reading vlog, which I'll link in the description box down below. It's quite a chunky one. Most short story collections are not this long. This one is nearly 400 pages. So I would like to finish that one. And then finally, this short story collection by Alfian is called Malay Sketches. And this one I put on my immediate TBR a couple of months ago and then didn't read it, but I do really want to read it. That's why I put it there. It sounds really intriguing. The back says, a hijab wearing schoolgirl who refuses to shake the president's hand, a ghost who kills children by squeezing their heads between her breasts, a woman who joins a dating website for East-Western connections, and a Malay doctor who is embarrassed by his Malay patient's teen pregnancy. So I would like to begin and also finish this one. And for those of you who have been paying a lot of attention over the past few months, there were also a couple of other books that I'd put on my immediate TBR when I was doing short story clear outs. I'd put Moss Witch on there, and I'd also put a novel by Ramona Ossabel called No One Is Here Except All of Us on my bedside table too, because I was taken in the moment and thought, yes, I'm going to read this straight away, and then I didn't. So I've just put them back on my shelves. They're over there. So these 8 books are the ones that have been sitting there the longest and the ones that I would like to either finish or decide that they're not for me and pass them on to somebody else. That is the task. Those are the books that I'm going to be speaking to you about, and this video will not be over until I have finished all of them. The slightly ironic thing about filming at this angle is that I have to put a huge stack of books on my bedside table to rest the camera on. And the whole point of this video is to erase the huge stack of books by my bedside table. But we're getting there. I'm checking in. It's a few days later. I meant to talk to you earlier, but Mr. M and I have been hugely distracted in the evenings, these past 2 evenings, by It's a Sin on Channel 4. If you haven't watched it yet, I know everyone's talking about it for very, very, very good reason. It's on Channel 4 in the UK, HBO in the States. It's a 5-part series following 5 friends in London at the beginning of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in the 80s, and it will rip your heart out and stamp on it. It's incredible, based on real life too, people that Russell T Davies knew when he was younger. It's just a very, very, very good series. Would very much recommend checking that out. We stayed up until 2 in the morning finishing it last night because it's just so heartbreakingly, devastatingly wonderful. So there we go. All right, on to books. Okay, so I have finished 3 of the books. The first one is Arid Dreams by Duanwad Pimwana, which is translated from the Thai by Mweepa Popsicle. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this is about 13 working class families living in Thailand. And I enjoyed this. I think my favourite stories were towards the beginning. And my favourite story in the whole book is the second one, which is called Wood Children. And it's about a woman who is crafting lots of children out of wood, and she would really like a child herself. She doesn't yet have one with her husband. And her husband, thinking that this will soothe her, brings a child of one of his colleagues home for dinner. And they bond, but then things go a bit wrong. And then she starts to think of, well, what if I use this child and use my knife and carve another child out of him? So that one is a very me story. I was definitely drawn to the darker stories that you could find in here. I'm always very intrigued by what Tilted Axis Press publish. And last week I wrote an article about that publishing house for Toast, which I'll link in the description down below. It was set up by Deborah Smith, who is the translator of Han Kang's work. And I interviewed her a few years ago. And since then I've been following the work that they've been doing with this press. So if you want to find out more about Deborah and also about this press and the books they published, then I'll link my article in the description box down below. Another book in translation that I finished, but I didn't get on with this one. This is The Sea Cloak and Other Stories by Nayrouz, Qarmout, and this is translated from the Arabic by Perween Richards. I think I said at the beginning of this video that I'd started this book but wasn't really gelling with it. It's a book that I desperately wanted to love. It's set on the Gaza Strip. It's about lots of different people who live there based on the author's own experience or people that she has met. She is fascinating. The author bio says that she is a Palestinian author and women's rights campaigner. She was born in Damascus in 1984, returned to the Gaza Strip as part of the 1994 Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement. Her short story, The Sea Cloak, was first published in the Book of Gaza in 2014, which I think is published by Comma Press. And she has written screenplays for several short films dealing with women's rights. Her political, social, and literary articles have also appeared in numerous newspapers and magazines. So I think it depends what you want to read this book for. If you want to read it to learn more about the Gaza Strip, I think it definitely offers those insights. I just didn't think it was that well written. It's extremely fragmented. Most of the stories jump from either person to person or from a period of time to another period of time, possibly within the same day, but it ends up almost reading like bullet pointed diary entries. And there are some wonderful lines within that. So the first line of a short story called Black Grapes begins. An old man can be seen leaning on a fence stake with a mobile phone in his hand. There isn't any room on his face for a smile. The furrows on his brow whirl around a deep centre, like the eye of the storm, a hole in time. I wish there had been more sentences like that. Overall, it just, I don't know, it just wasn't one for me. A poetry collection that I finished is Dear Big Gods by Mona Arshi. Mona messaged me about probably, I was going to say a year ago, but it must be longer than that because last year doesn't count, right? So I think it's about a year and a half ago. Mona messaged me. We were discussing possibly doing an event together. She had read my poetry collection, The Girl Aquarium. She thought that it would be a good pairing to do readings together. And I hadn't yet read hers. I'd read fragments of her work, some poems here and there, but I hadn't read the full collection yet. And I can definitely see why she said that. I think if you enjoy my book, The Girl Aquarium, then you will enjoy Mona's collection as well. This is about, I would say the main theme in this is grief and losing her brother, but there are also poems in here that deal with womanhood, girlhood, coming of age, and bodies. And there is a folklore element to some of them as well, which I thought was absolutely delightful. Let me give you a couple of sample lines. One called Ghazel Darkness begins, around the base of the trees, amongst the broad oaks, I leave my daughters to ripen in the darkness. Is that not an amazing line? We plant cloves, tiny armless gods, into the loam. My girls are distracted and starved of light, which is normal, which is essence of girl darkness. I slip outside and light a candle, cauterize a bud. Shabash, I call to my girls, my praise in the darkness. One of my favourite poems in the collection is called Like the First Morning, and it's talking about daybreak as if it's a young girl and her being timid and trying to connect with it. And a couple of the lines says, I run my fingers along her back, so light's back, and through her hair, which flows like lava across her pale collarbones. When I flinch, she flinches, this soft girl, this churning, broken song. And that really reminded me of a poem in this collection here, which is also by Tilted Axis Press. This isn't Tilted Axis, but this is one of their pamphlets from their Translating Feminism series. It's poems translated from the Tamil. And there's a poem in here, my favourite poem, which is called Light is a Prowling Cat. Opening the door noiselessly, Light puts out a hand hesitantly, wondering if it's still raining. Seeing that the rain has gone, it spreads out its shadow shop upon the clustering trees, then climbs up the tent face to sit and watch the world, scattering upon the earth the beauty of cat colours. I love this idea of personifying sunlight as a timid girl and also as a cat that's creeping out and, you know, stretching out its paws. I just think they're such great images, as well as talking to you about books. You know that I like to chat in these reading vlogs, so I thought I would show you some things that have come in the post. It was my birthday last week and you can't actually see in the camera, but I'll do a cutaway. There are flowers in the flat which are making me very happy. The flowers on the mantelpiece are from my mum and my mum-in-law, and the little white ones are from my lovely editor Lisa. And I thought I would show you a few things I was kindly sent for my birthday from BookTube Powles. Actually, in that cutaway you will see a small vase with flowers on the front. That was sent to me from Lauren. Sana sent me these beautiful dried flowers, which I'm going to pop in the blue vase after the flowers in there look a bit too sad to be there anymore. Sana also sent me these postcards. I will link them down below, the designer of them, because they are inspired by Northern Lights, which, as you know, His Dark Materials, my favourite books of all time. Lauren from Lauren and the Books sent me these very beautiful candles and a candle holder as well, which is over there. Jean sent me this, which is really cute. This is the Tea Dragon Society, but it's the card game. You've probably heard me talk about the Tea Dragon Society and other people as well, obviously. It was one of my favourite books of last year. It's a graphic novel, it's adorable, it's amazing. Go check it out. They brought out a card game to go alongside it, so she sent this one to me. I will say that it's definitely more for children than for grown-ups, but it is very, very cute. If you've played the card game Unstable Unicorns, I would say it's like a child's version of that. The illustrations, as you would imagine, from Kay and Neil are beautiful. Let me get some out for you. As you can see, very adorable. And then Mercedes sent me this, which is called Kanagawa, which we haven't played yet, but it says it is a strategic and poetic card game in which you must paint the most beautiful print. Improve your studio to immortalize the most beautiful subjects through the seasons and become the most prestigious student of the painter Hokuzai. I'm excited to try that. And then this arrived a few days ago and has been quarantined, so I thought we would open it together. This is something I bought myself. I've opened the top so that I don't fumble around on camera. I remembered a couple of weeks ago that the Poetry Society sell Poems on the Underground that are displayed inside tube carriages. So if you're not familiar, Poems on the Underground has been around for quite a long time, and they put Poems on the Underground at the top of the tube carriages, so you can read them while you're traveling, and then they sell them on their website. They sell them for a penny, 1 pence plus 3.50 postage. So because I miss London, even though I live in London, I haven't seen it, and I definitely haven't been on a tube, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to buy one of the poetry posters from a tube, and then I can get it framed at some point. So I was looking on their website, which I'll link in the description box down below, because it's just great. I'm not sure how many they have left, but you can have a read through, see if any poems speak to you, and then, as I said, it's a penny plus postage. So I went for this one here. Let's see. Ooh, there's a note inside. It says, "Dear Jen, thank you for your order and your shout out." Oh, I mentioned it on Instagram. "We've had over 60 orders since you posted about Poems on the Underground last night. Enjoy your poster and take care, Helen." That's very sweet. Thank you. Okay, this is the poem that I went for. Can you see it? It's quite big. Isn't it fun? I think it's going to be tricky to find a frame. Mr. M said he actually wanted to try and make a frame for it himself. So this is translated from the Italian. It's by Salvatore Quasimodo, and it says, "Everyone is alone on the heart of the earth, pierced by a ray of sun, and suddenly it's evening." When I read that, it kind of punched me in the gut. I felt like it summed up 2020 and 2021 very well indeed. It's called "And Suddenly It's Evening." I realised that this poem is kind of the Italian equivalent of William Carlos Williams' The Red Wheelbarrow, in that every Italian ever will have read this at school and had it thrust upon them. So it's more novel to me than it is to other Italians, but I really, really love this. "Everyone is alone on the heart of the earth, pierced by a ray of sun, and suddenly it's evening." Yeah, so I'm very happy to have this in my home, and I will frame that, or Mr. M will make a frame for it at some point, and it can go somewhere. For now, I'm going to keep it inside this box, and if you fancy checking out Poems on the Underground, I will link their posters in the description box down below. I'm going to come back to you when I have read some more, and in the meantime, I'm going to leave you with some footage of me making gnocchi for dinner last night, in case you want to see that, and I will leave the recipe in the description box down below as well. Gnocchi is one of my absolute favourite things to make, and it is super easy. You need about 500 grams of potatoes. I think I had about 540 here, so you don't need to be exact about it. You need to peel them, chop them up, and pop them in a pan with some salt, and then you're going to boil them for 20 minutes until they are done. Here I am chopping them up. There we go, look at me go. Into the pan, boil away. Okay, while they are boiling, I started on the pasta sauce. So I begin by frying dried oregano in olive oil with salt and pepper, and then I add chopped basil stalks and also chopped garlic. Go wild on the garlic. I think I've got about 5 cloves here. And add that for 30 seconds before adding 600 grams of passata. Turn that to a really low heat and simmer for a while before adding a splash of white wine vinegar, half a tablespoon of sugar, and some tomato puree and a handful of parmesan. Then you need to mash the potato and leave that to cool. And once it's cool, you want to measure out 150 grams of plain flour. Put the potato on the table, add the flour on top, a bit of salt, and then 1 egg. You don't want to do it on a bowl, you just want to do it straight onto a clean surface and then knead that together into dough. It's a little bit messy, but it's really fun. You then break that into about, I think I did 6 parts here, and stretch it out into, I guess, almost like pasta caterpillars. Yeah, that's what we're going to go for. You can use some olive oil on the surface to make sure that nothing sticks. Don't use any more flour though, because otherwise it'll make it stodgy. And then once you have got them into those long shapes, you want to cut them into gnocchi sized pieces. Very, very satisfying. You do not have to be precise about this at all. And then once you've done that, you want to dip a fork in some flour and then press very lightly on each piece of gnocchi, which will give it a groove and help the pasta sauce stick to it. And then once you've done this, you want to boil it for about 1 or 2 minutes. They'll float to the surface when they're done. Then drain them, put the pasta sauce on top, add some basil leaves and some goat's cheese and some ground pepper, and it is delicious. Hey, I'm coming at you in my pajamas to wrap up 2 more books that I've finished. One of them is this one here, which is Malay Sketches by Alfian. At the beginning of this book, we're introduced to the context of its creation, and I think I found that the most fascinating. So Alfian was writing these sketches, that's what he calls them, these sketches of characters. I would call it flash fiction, but they're not really self-contained. So sketches probably is exactly the right word that it should be. This feels like an artist's sketchbook, sketching a community. And it's a series of interconnected sketches or short stories or flash fiction that manages to create a tapestry of a large community. And as he was writing these sketches, he would then post them to Facebook. And I love the meta-ness of that, writing sketches in a fragmented way and then sharing those to a community. Stories about community shared to a community, and then people would give feedback on these sketches, and then he would incorporate the feedback to make the community that he was creating even more realistic. So it's like a snake eating its own tail. It feeds into itself. There's something almost eternal about that, and then obviously it's sent out into the world in the form of a book, and then a different community, a community of readers reading the finished sketches, then interacts with it again. So I loved learning about that, and then of course enjoyed reading the stories after that as well. If you were to list the characteristics of this book, they're not what I would be immediately drawn to when picking up a short story collection. So that's flash fiction. What am I doing? Flash fiction, realist, and also interconnected stories. I know that lots of people love interconnected short stories, but in my experience of seeing people talk about them, it tends to be people who don't normally enjoy short story collections, who love interconnected short story collections because it feels more like a cohesive whole, more like a novel, whereas I really love short story collections, so I don't feel like I need that interconnected element. Sometimes that ends up feeling forced. That didn't feel the case here. I thought there would be more magical realism just going by the blurb, and there isn't, though there is an element of folklore. And one of the stories is about a ghost. Let me find it. Yes, as she held the x-rays in her hand, Samira remembered the story of the Hanu Tek-Tek, the bosom ghost who prowled at dusk and killed children by placing their heads between her breasts. What a way to perish, nose squashed against sternum, ears walled in by hot, yeasty flesh. Yummy. So all of these stories are centered around the Malay Muslim community in Singapore. And without getting into the individual tales, the overall premise is about how we exist within other people's stories and how other people bear witness to our narratives. We're obviously very acutely aware of our own stories. So there are stories that feel quite insular with people looking in, but then you'll see a glimpse of that character within somebody else's story. And it's kind of the overlay, a Venn diagram of storytelling. How important are our tales when other people see them? How important are we as people to other people? How do other people perceive the things that we are going through? I think I enjoyed analysing the structure of this book and the construction of this book more perhaps than the writing itself, which is not a criticism of the book at all. That's just the thing I loved about it the most. And the second book that I finished was Magnolia by Mingya Powles. I adore the way that she uses both colour and food in this book. I mean, as you can see, I annotated quite a lot. Here she's talking about persimmons and she says, we taste the word, we cut it open, wondering at how it sounds so like the word for lion, lion fruit, like a tiny roaring sun. She has a poem in here called Colour Fragments, which uses hex triplets, which I love. I fell in love with those when I wrote Plum Pie, Zombie Green, Yellow Bee, Purple Monster. So each of these prose poem stanzas is about a different hex triplet. One about saffron says, if I could step inside any Rothko painting, it would be saffron, which is different from his other yellows because of the thin, bright line that divides the colour fields, not colour shapes or colour squares or colour blocks, none of which are wide enough to contain the light. A line dividing two yellow atmospheres glows along the edges, an electric current. If you stare long enough, it seems to get bigger, slowly opening at one end until it forms a bright gap that you could just fit through by putting each one of your limbs inside one by one until you were swallowed by light, and your skin is the colour of sunflower petals right before they die, and you are either floating or drowning or both at the same time. I can't read that without smiling, even though we're talking about, drowning, just being completely consumed by colour. It's about the gaining and also the loss of language. It's discussing culture and cultural appropriation. She's looking at the whitewashing of Chinese characters in films. She's talking about food that she loved as a child and then has been reunited with as an adult and the relationship between those two things. And it's just full of beautiful imagery. One night you said my name in the dark and it came out like a ghost from between two trees. I mean, I could sit here and quote lots of this to you, but I won't. I will stop. It's brilliant. And also, if you're new to poetry or feel intimidated by poetry, I would say that this is a great one to go to. It has a lot of prose poetry in it, which is more narrative driven. So check this one out. I think we're going to go for a really rainy, muddy walk. So I'm going to go do that and then I'll catch up with you in a bit. Hey, here's a final update from me. I've edited the rest of this footage and realised it's quite long, so I'm going to do this quickly for two reasons. One, because this video is already long, and two, because I've just remembered that it's the end of the month, so I'm going to be doing my reading wrap-up soon, so I'm going to save some of this chat for then. So the final three books, I did decide that this one wasn't for me. This is You Let Me In by Camilla Bruce. This was the weird, did she die, did she disappear, did someone kill her, solve the mystery to get your inheritance book that I mentioned at the beginning. There is an element in this book that I just generally don't get on with in fiction, and that is adult books that use fairy elements, and not in an overt fantasy or magical realism way, but in a, is this real or is it a representation of trauma? and you have to try and work out if that's true. Sometimes I've read that and enjoyed it, such as in Carolyn Jess Cook's book, The Boy Who Could See Demons. Maybe it's just that I've read it quite a lot before, so it's just a personal taste. This one wasn't for me. And then I am not quite finished this, but I will finish it to speak about it in my wrap up. This is The Wilds by Julia Elliott. This is a short story collection that I feel myself sinking into. I think it's going to be one that I love. Touch wood, touch all of the wood. If you like Ramona Osbel, if you like Karen Russell, if you enjoy rich magical realism, storytelling about coming of age and the way that young girls in particular perceive the world, then this one is for you. And then I finished reading Brenda Shaughnessy's The Octopus Museum, which I'll speak about in my wrap-up. This is about the Anthropocene. It is about our relationship with nature. It has some letters in to humans about the destruction of the planet, but then it has more subtle poems about the importance of nature and our personal connection with nature. And it's called The Octopus Museum because that's an image that she comes back to again and again, the idea of the sea as a museum, something that will be held up as a thing that used to be great and that we destroyed. But also she comes back to the myth of Bakemonotaco, which is a Japanese folktale about an octopus who decided she didn't need all of her 8 legs, so she dispensed with 4 of them, and then she regretted that decision and she has to try and get those back again. Kind of about self-destruction and the planet being part of ourselves and all of that. It is so beautifully written. I will link some of her poems in the description box down below so that you can go and check them out. I hope that you have enjoyed this reading vlog. I feel happy to have returned to them. I took a little bit of a break, and not from making videos in general, but from more of the vlog type stuff. If you would like to see more cooking and baking, I do post that regularly over on Instagram. And if you would like to support the channel and you have the means to do so, it would be amazing if you could consider supporting me on Patreon, and I will link that in the description box down below. Support on there allows me to make more free content for everyone and also pays for my time in making all my content accessible, subtitling, all of that stuff. Yeah, I hope that you're all doing as well as you can be in these times that we find ourselves in, and I will speak to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.